Hey, what's up guys? Today we're on site at a mini home that's scheduled to be demolished. The service wires are all still hooked up, energized, meter's still on, so we're going to take you through the entire process as we dismantle the service and a step-by-step description as to what I'm doing and why. Let's check it out. Alright, so we're pretty well all set to go here. The first step we're going to do is make sure we're at the right location. Double check the work order, confirm that the meter number matches what's on the home for a few reasons. Main reason being that we're at the right location and we don't disconnect somebody's home that's not supposed to be disconnected. You get home from work and the wires are gone. That wouldn't be good. Another reason is make sure that there's no theft of power, that the meter wasn't swapped, something to that effect. So we've got meter number 82660. So we're going to check that out now, and we're also going to remove that meter as our first step. So this particular job, it's pretty obvious we're at the right location. It's a home that definitely looks like it's scheduled to be demolished. So the meter number does match. We're going to capture the reading there, reading 99623. So when pulling these meters, guys, very important to make sure that everything's properly attached to the home so you don't pull the whole meter box off the house. Everything in there looks good. We've got our reading. Alright, so we're here with the owner of the property now, the park owner, not the person that was renting this unit, and also someone from our company that has authorization to go in to retrieve our hot water tank that was being rented. And quite a mess in there. We actually discovered that someone stole the entire panel and the live wires were left hanging inside the house. So we can see why the place is being demolished. Our hot water tanks are contracted out, so buddy just inside draining that hot water tank with the owner of the building there now. So the fire marshal was involved and the place has been deemed unsafe and it's being demolished. So with the property owner here, we had permission to go inside. Our company was renting out the hot water tank, so we had a representative from the contractors that look after the plumbing and the water tanks we rent out, and they went inside to retrieve that, and the inside was, wow, unbelievable, very, very sad. We discovered as soon as they opened the door, as soon as the owner opened the door, the main panel feeding this house was missing, stolen. Somebody broke in, stole the main panel, all the wiring in the house, and that service was still energized when someone stole that. You can see where they had the main wires cut clear and stole everything but the live wires. So it's a good thing that the property owner addressed this issue and called us right away to get this service disconnected, and it's being scheduled to be demolished next week. So let's strap the helmet cam on and carry on with the removal of this service. Alright, so just as we get started here, guys, a few things to mention. It is very important that you remove the meter before disconnecting the service. If for some reason you weren't able to access the meter and that main breaker is closed in and it's feeding something like a water heater where there's a 240 volt coil, when you go to cut the wire, this is all energized here now. Let's say you cut it right here, this is the feed, this should fall dead. However, if that meter is still on, this one that's still live can actually backfeed through the water heater and still throw voltage back up through the other hot leg. So meter's off, so once we do cut it, the load side will be falling dead. Another thing to mention, there's no primary on this pole. Getting a little bit crusty up there, but still good. So if there was primary on this pole, if we were on the other side of the road, we'd be using our 20 kV gloves, especially if we can reach the high voltage with any part of our body or any tool. If we can come within our safe limits of approach of 2 foot 1 inches, in fact, with any part of our body or our tool. So for that reason, we would be wearing our 20 kV gloves. Right up here, we're all good with our 1 kV gloves, which we already did the air test. Next thing to mention, this is quite a long loop. When we cut that off, the loop going this way is going to have quite a bit of strain on it pulling the pole in this direction. In this case, we do have a down guy holding it, so we're not worried about the integrity of the pole. This whole neighborhood, the infrastructure is starting to get a little bit old. You can see there's a few deficiencies. We've got this guy wire that's slack. It does have an insulated epoxy rod near the high voltage on the other end. However, that could be a hazard. We should resag and tighten that up. I'll get a crew here actually to repair some of these deficiencies, as they're not an emergency right away. All we're going to do for today is get rid of the service wire, clear all the wires from the home, including the communication wires, so that the demo crew can work safely. Now, when you're training to be a lineman or an electrician of any sort, you always hook up your neutral first and disconnect it last. If not, you can throw a high or low voltage in through the customer's equipment. In this case, we're going to do the opposite, which is okay as long as you do fully understand what you're doing. And the reason for that, we've got a lot of dead shorts near this complete mess of live wires. So we're gonna clear that hazard. I'm actually gonna cut this neutral clear. We're gonna get that completely out of here. You want to make sure you do have control of all your wires. You can see here all those crimpets. Those live connections are covered. However, if that were to fall in between that connector, we would have quite an arc flash on our hands. Some of this stuff out of our way. I could cut it over here, but I'm going to have this whole mess of connectors. There's that wire. If we ever do hook this back up, we're going to get rid of all that. When I cut that, if this end falls down with all this connectors, good chance we're going to short something out. So we're going to come over on this end, get ourselves a little bit of slack, and we're going to cut this live wire right here. Now, when we cut this, this is going to be dead. It's going to fall dead because we do have the meter pulled. We want to make sure this doesn't spin up and around and hit into something that's grounded or another phase. And we're going to tape up our exposed live end. And do the same for the next hot. All right, so we're all good. Let's get rid of all these loose ends here, make it a lot easier to pull that wire up. And last thing we're gonna do is drop the loop. Now, whenever you're dropping wires like this, you're gonna want to take your hand line, run it around the back of the pole, hook it onto the wire, and lower that down slowly so you don't damage any of the customer's property. We're not too worried about that here today, so we're just gonna cut it. Actually, before I let that fly, so your wire doesn't tangle up and all the stuff below, one trick is get that swaying back and forth, and when it's passed on the far side of the home, past all the other wires, we'll let her fly and it shouldn't get wrapped up in anything. Beauty. And down here we've got a whole bunch of old communication lines that are no longer in use. Cut all those clear and coil those up. So I imagine they will be putting a new home on the site eventually, and at that time we'll have a crew come in. We'll have to completely get rid of that tree, replace the pole, resag those overhead guy wires. The triplex there is not in bad shape. All those communication lines, they're all garbage. That can all be cut down, but we're not going to worry about that today. Normally, if you're removing a service, you're going to get your ladder out, cut everything clear from the mast. In this case, everything's getting completely demolished by Ohio, so I'm not going to bother getting my ladder out to go up there and unnecessarily cut that clear. So we're just going to free up all the wires. So the easiest way to coil up your triplex, drag it out onto flat ground. Just gonna start rolling it up. I usually pass the wire around itself a few times to knot it up. And just wheel it along the ground here. Pretty much the same thing goes for the telephone wire. And while I would never ever normally recommend this because it knots up the wire, this is all getting scrapped. The old school wrap around the arm trick coils that telephone wire up pretty quick. One last thing I did want to point out, if ever you come up to one of these meter boxes with a steel ground rod going into the ground, it's not uncommon for the frost to push that up. You can see it's already starting to break out the knockout. Eventually that ground rod, the frost is going to force it right up into that live lug. So you take a peek underneath. If you see that this here is right up inside that box, be very careful. You might have to de-energize the wire before even removing the meter. These bells before we go, little job from yesterday. These are dead end insulators, and from the ground I can see that crack. It's quite a bad crack. I can see it from the ground, and I confirm with binoculars that the dead end unit was cracked. I talked about the ring test before. When these are hanging off a structure, you can see I just lost it there now. But if you ring it with the hammerhead on your insulated stick, a good bell is going to ring. A cracked bell is not. During work permit, you're checking the bells right quick. You run a tool down the bells. You'll quickly figure out which ones are good and which ones aren't, if the cracks aren't quite as obvious as this guy. All right, so we're all good to go here. I just had an electrician call me for another job. He's all set for his reconnect, so we're gonna head in that direction. But crazy story before we go. when the owner was here, he mentioned when they first came to the site with the fire marshal and the police, when they walked into the house, first thing they noticed, there was a turtle running across the floor. Like, turtle. And the turtle ran across the floor, and the door to the bathroom was cut, so there was a space between the floor and the door. And he said the turtle ran underneath the door and up into the bathtub somehow that was filled with dirty water. And then the police officer kind of jumped, said, you know, holy crap, look out. And there was a tarantula crawling across the floor. So they found a couple tarantulas living in this home also that I'm assuming were pets, but they weren't in their cage. And I'm not sure what they did with the tarantulas and the turtle, but the I don't know if the people were. Anyways, wow, bad scene. So you never know what you're gonna get into doing the trouble response. It's a different day every day. You see a lot of stuff. I didn't expect to quite show up to this when I had a work order for emergency service disconnect for a demolition. But anyways, glad you guys stopped in as always. See you all soon.